Well, you're right on time for Africa Focus. Good afternoon from where you're watching us from. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Talk to us via social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, Joel Church M on Twitter, as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Church. Send in an SMS via 111 444 111. But first, here are stories making headlines. More than 1,800 inmates escape after heavily armed gang attack a prison in southern Nigeria using explosives. As Djibouti starts voting today, campaigns in Chad continue ahead of coming elections on April 11th. Libya Prime Minister hopes for flight resumption to Italy. We begin our focus in West Africa, where more than 1,800 inmates have escaped after heavily armed gang attacked a prison in southern Nigeria using explosives. Authorities say the attackers blasted their way into the Weri prison in Imo State, engaging guards in a gun battle and breaking out inmates.
More than 1,800 inmates have escaped after a heavily armed gang attacked a prison in southern Nigeria using explosives in one of the West African country's largest jailbreaks. The attackers blasted their way into Owerri prison in Imo State, engaging guards in a gun battle and breaking out inmates, according to the National Corrections Authority. Imo State Correction Service spokesman James Madugba said that the number of escaped inmates is yet to be confirmed. The assailants arrived in pickup trucks and buses before storming the facility. No group claimed responsibility for the assault, though President Buhari called the attack an act of terrorism carried out by anarchists and urged security forces to capture the assailants and the escaped detainees. Prisons in Africa's most populous country are often overcrowded, and as many as 70% of inmates are on remand and can be held awaiting trials for years. The governor of neighboring Abia State imposed a night curfew on 2 towns there to protect local residents without direct reference to the prison attack. Imo State is part of a region that has long been a hotbed for Nigerian separatist groups and where tensions between federal authorities and the indigenous Igbo population are often high. The indigenous people of Biafra separatist movement has recently been posting videos on social media of dozens of its militiamen in training. Authorities imposed a curfew on parts of Imo State earlier this year after clashes between the army and the local militia. But the IPOB spokesman Emmanuel Powerful rejected any involvement in the Imo prison attack, dismissing any accusations as lies. Calls for a separate state of Biafra in the south are a sensitive subject in Nigeria after a unilateral declaration of independence from British rule in 1967 sparked a brutal 30-month civil war. Buhari is facing several security challenges, including a more than decade-long jihadist insurgency in Nigeria's northeast, a spate of mass kidnappings by criminal gangs in the northwest, and a surge in piracy on commercial shipping in the Gulf of Guinea off the coast. Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Kaniaru Alex.
Shifting gears now to matters of politics, Niger's newly elected President Mohamed Bazoum hit out at terrorist groups whose barbarity has exceeded every limit after taking the helm of a country struggling with 2 jihadist insurgencies.
These great ambitions cannot be realized as long as our country is confronted with the insecurity generated by the existence of terrorist groups, whose barbarity has just exceeded all limits on the occasions of killings that they carried out this year in the departments of Olam. For a long time, criminals in a Daesh-affiliated Islamic State in Greater Sahara almost exclusively attacked defense and security forces. But for some time, they have been targeting village leaders and then progressively civilians in an indiscriminate manner. Since last January, they have engaged in large-scale massacres of innocent civilians, occasionally committing real war crimes. Terrorism is a real misfortune for our country.
Commettant à l'occasion des vrais crimes de guerre. Le terrorisme est un vrai malheur pour notre pays.
Meanwhile, the Union of Humanist Democrats, which is the opposition party of Gabri Parfait Kolela, who died of COVID-19 in France the day after the presidential election of 21st March, is now calling for the annulment of the vote after countering official results.
The polls of 17 and 21st March 2021 were once again an electoral hold-up against the background of a great masquerade. After processing 1,172 yellow cards received and compiled out of 5,778 expected, the provisional results are as follows. Kolela's Guy Bryce Perfait Kolelas garnered 176,187 votes, equivalent to 64.13%. Sassou Nguesso Denise garnered 86,264 votes, equivalent to 31.40%. And Zon Matthias had 55,633 votes, equivalent to 2.05%. Ultimately, the political bureau of the Union of Humanist Democrats invites the Constitutional Court to rule on the law and therefore to pronounce a pure and simple annulment of the provisional results of the elections of 17 and 21st March 2021.
Scrutin des 17 et 21.
Still a focus on matters politics. Campaign in Chad continue ahead of the coming elections on April 11th. Posters of Chadian President Idriss Déby Itno are displayed in the streets of the capital N'Djamena, who is expected to extend his 30-year rule.
Chadian police dispersed 2 attempts to hold rallies by opposition parties calling for a boycott of upcoming elections in which President Idriss Déby Itno is expected to extend his 30-year rule. The rallies were organized by Déby opponents Saleh Kabazbo and Success Marsa to call on Chadians to boycott the first round of the vote on April 11th. Dozens of heavily equipped riot police surrounded the home of Kabazbo, who recently withdrew his candidacy to protest against the militarization of the electoral campaign. The head of the National Union for Development and Renewal Party had wanted to hold the rally there. Earlier, police dispersed supporters who had sought to challenge the ban on such gatherings put in place by the district's mayor. Later, in front of the headquarters of Masras, the Transformers Party, police deployed and fired tear gas, forcing a few dozen supporters to flee. In the run-up to the vote, the 68-year-old Déby has banned and violently put down peaceful marches for his ouster, with some of his potential challengers arrested, barred from the election or both. Amnesty International has raised the alarm over restrictions on the right to peaceful assembly and arbitrary arrest, while UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres deplored the use of force. The vast desert country has become a key regional ally of the West in the fight against jihadists. Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Harriet Chimea.
Away from that, an official from the World Food Programme says the organization is supporting host families in Pemba, northern Mozambique, who are providing food and shelter to survivors of the deadly attack by Islamist militants 400 kilometers north in Pama. The WFP has evacuated survivors by boat to Pemba, but estimates that 23,000 people still remain in the area.
Managed to evacuate about 380 people. And people have also been arriving on ferries. Now, the ferry journey takes about 24 hours, so you can imagine families who have arrived here and they have witnessed horrors. They've heard gunshots, they talk about people waving guns in their faces, escaping to the bush, walking on foot, having very little food, very little to drink. Probably about 76% of the people that we've managed to evacuate are women and children. And obviously in Cabo Delgado itself there has been chronic malnutrition for many years. We already know that 950,000 people are food insecure. So if you can imagine, the kind of most critical thing really is to make sure that we reach the unverified number, which I'm quoting IOM as well, is 23,000. Which we believe people to still be 50,000 people are affected at this moment. So we are, again, we have not only in Pemba, but we have at other locations outside of Palma as well, where we pre-position food so that IDPs that are either crossing on foot or by road will have will have food that we will be able to assist them. Although have actually arrived in some of the neighbouring towns or in Pemba itself, and they've gone straight into what we call the host community, which would be their families and relatives. And so you've also seen households of six people in a household, which have, opened their doors, incredibly welcoming, and let in, their families and relatives to make sure that they can also shelter and be safe. And so those households are also, we also look after the host community, knowing full well that, that they are taking in, extra mouths to feed.
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come. Wrestling makes a comeback in Senegal after a year-long wait. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Moving on, Libyan interim Prime Minister Abdul Hamid Deiba hopes flights to Italy will resume to enhance trade and economic cooperation with Tripoli during a joint press conference with Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi.
We greatly appreciate that the fact Italy was one of the few countries to maintain its relationship with Libya and its embassy in Tripoli. In order to enhance the trade and economic cooperation between the two countries, we look forward to the reopening of the Italian airspace to Libyan airlines and therefore extend trips between the two countries and to restart over our customs agreement.
Now, when in 2019 Nigerian painter Julius Abaje depicted President Muhammadu Buhari as the Joker, he never imagined that a year later his portrait would become a symbol of youth protest. With the tip of his brush in his tiny studio in the popular Alimosho district of Lagos, the 28-year-old artist challenges Nigeria's institutions in order to fight social injustices.
Nigeria's social satirist fights injustice with art. When in 2019, Nigerian painter Julius Agjabe depicted President Muhammadu Buhari as the Joker, he never imagined that a year later, his portrait would be made a symbol of youth protest.
It's a tough career here in Nigeria, so through my elementary school level and all of that, no one talked to us about the possibility of being an artist, so I never followed that path. So originally I started out wanting to be a computer engineer, and along the line I rediscovered my passion for art.
His image, Joko New, showing Buhari with a red nose, white makeup and a terrifying smile, was the emblem of demonstrations against police brutality that rocked the country last October.
It's a photo of the president, wearing a clown makeup.
Even before the Joker image, Agjabe had already earned a place on Nigerians' vibrant cultural scene. He is also one of the most committed artists.
Are playing with us, and they don't take us seriously. They do the funniest things, and in the end, you ask yourself, what could have been the rationale behind this action?
Nigeria, with its 200 million inhabitants, may well be considered Africa's largest democracy, but it has barely turned the page on its history of military dictatorships. More than 20 years after its democratic transition, the country remains plagued on corrupt politics, rampant poverty, and violations of basic rights. Between acrylic pots and worn brushes, Agjabe rolls out his canvases on the tiled floor of his studio for a visitor. The social satirist, as he likes to call himself, Agjabe knows few taboos. Take his portrait of a nun painted as a chimpanzee with a nose-piercing tattoo and a planked neckline, risky content in a country where religious beliefs are strong and where blasphemy is often branded the worst of sins.
For example, there was this one time when I got arrested, when the police just accosted us on the road, and a few friends and I went out and we were returning, and they just accosted, they blocked us on the road, and they told us to get down from our vehicle, and they started asking us different questions, started going through our phones. I remember that on that day, I didn't have this picture on my phone, but imagine if I had this picture on my phone and the policeman sees this, you know, a depiction of him with a monkey head or a dog head. I mean, it would raise questions and it might put me in trouble. Being arrested would only motivate me to do more, because being arrested means that they are starting to notice the work that I create. So it means that, yes, egos are being bruised. Yes, they are starting to notice that people are disgruntled, people are unhappy about the things that they are doing. So yes, getting arrested would only motivate me to do more, because then I know that they are conscious that there is someone who's creating art actively creating art about them.
But the strength of his caricatures, which are as funny as they are shocking, is also thanks to their technical skill. He learned his craft at the oldest art school of Lagos in Yaba College of Technology, from where he graduated in 2017.
To be fair, most of the learners here, when they are asked to express themselves, they always lean to issues that, you know, border around social justice. I think it's just because of the state of the nation, things like that. Everyone has something to say. The news is always bad, so there's always something to discuss anyway.
His dexterity comes to the fore in a portrait made with knives of two monkeys. The figures wearing police helmets are seen in mugshots with signs around their necks saying murder and duplicity and theft. The dipchi, entitled Good Cop, Bad Cop, was produced long before last year's #EndSARS protest erupted over police brutality and forced the government to disband the SARS Special Police Brigade. This image is now on display at his art school's museum. The young artist picked up his brushes again when last year's youth protest movement was brutally suppressed. Amnesty International said the army opened fire and killed up 10 people, a charge the military has denied. From this trauma and this anger, 3 paintings were born. Far from his caricatures, they are perhaps his most successful, at least his most poignant. With a blood-red background, one of them shows a shirtless black man raising his fist. In a place of his face, the artist painted a shooting range target riddled with bullets. On the ground, upturned barricades recall those of the Lagos toll gate booth, where the army alleged opened fire on peaceful demonstrators. The young painter wants to fight with his art that portrays the evils of the society. Caroline Suma, Africa Focus.
Away from that, visitors browse exhibits at Egypt's new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in the Fustat district of Old Cairo after the museum opened fully to the public the day after a procession of floats carried the mummified remains of 22 pharaohs who passed through the capital to their new resting place at the museum.
A procession of floats carried the mummified remains of 22 pharaohs, including Egypt's most powerful ancient queen, through Cairo in an eye-catching parade to a new resting place.
And yesterday we watched the parade on the television, and so we came today to the museum, and it's really beautiful, really exceptional. We're so happy to be able to see all of the Egyptian products and statues here now.
For their procession through Cairo's streets, the mummies were placed in special containers filled with nitrogen under conditions similar to their regular display cases. The new resting place, the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization in the Fustat district of Old Cairo, consists of sleek, low-rise buildings topped with a pyramid amid expansive grounds.
The mummies that we received yesterday are the most important pieces here in the museum. They are being prepared to be shown in 15 days after reopening the nitrogen capsules. Then we'll be able to show them with their coffins and related pieces.
Under hefty security, the mummies were driven on floats 7 kilometers across the capital from the iconic Egyptian Museum to the new National Museum of Egyptian Civilization.
Why it is called the Civilization Museum is because the most important thing here is the concept of civilization, not a specific time or era. Every showcase tells a story of different concept of civilization. We connect all civilizations here.
According to the UNESCO Director General Audrey Azoulay, the mummies rehousing marks the end of much work to improve their conservation and exhibition. Lincoln Ombogo, Switch TV News.
And now getting sporty, 10 Bali Senegalese wrestlers raise a chant, singing "Mother, Pray for Us" while jogging up and down a sandy field by the Atlantic Ocean. Training has resumed after a year of coronavirus-related restrictions that had stopped them from practicing their sport wrestling in the West African nation, which is a centuries-old tradition rooted in harvest festivals and draws a fanatical following.
10 Bali Senegalese wrestlers raise a chant, singing "Mother, Pray for Us" while jogging up and down a sandy field by the Atlantic Ocean. Training has resumed after a year of coronavirus-related restrictions that had stopped them from practicing their sport. Khalifa Nyang, the head of the wrestling stable that includes Sene, said that few are allowed to approach wrestlers ahead of bouts for fear of black magic.
Fights stopped in March 2020 and are only restarting 1 year later in March 2021. So this has caused a lot of damage to all the actors in the wrestling sector, because wrestling is not only the wrestlers, it's the stables and the whole economic environment around wrestling.
Wrestling in the West African nation is a centuries-old tradition rooted in harvest festivals and draws a fanatical following.
All Senegalese love wrestling because it is where we find ourselves. Not only do we practice the sport, it is a whole culture that is brought back in the wrestling sessions.
Hulking fighters dressed in loincloths face off in packed stadiums, performing mystic rituals in the sand before going toe-to-toe. On Sunday, the first major bout since the start of the pandemic will take place in a 20,000-seater stadium just outside of Dakar. A former national champion, once crowned king of the arenas, Sene, is hoping to make a comeback in his match against a fighter known as Lac 2.
The period of the pandemic was very difficult for us. If we only had to take care of our families, there would be no problem. But there are other people who believe in us and with whom we have to share with what we have. I'm very close to my supporters and I have an obligation to support them. We have really felt the damage caused by the pandemic.
There are 5 separate bouts on Sunday's fight card, but this one is the main draw. Panels advertising the event line in the streets.
It is really the whole African tradition that is dressed in the wrestling matches. That's why we are really happy that the wrestling season is starting again and that we are going to have some great fights.
Such fights can grind daily life to a halt, with many people glued to television sets to watch wrestlers spar and attempt to throw each other to the ground. But Senegal's fans have been deprived of the spectacle since the onset of the pandemic last year, when the government banned wrestling matches and training sessions in professional stables. After nationwide unrest, Senegal lifted health restrictions this month, allowing the sport to resume. After the training session in Dakar, suburb of Pete Mbao, barrel-chested fighters grapple with each other until a call to prayer interrupts them.
This fight is of utmost importance to me. My career depends on it. I must not lose it, especially as if it was my last big fight that I lost, the king of the arena crown. I have to win.
Sene, whose real name is Mamadou Ngom, won the prestigious King of the Arena's title in 2018 but lost it in the following year. A victory against Lactu would allow him to just for the title again. Like Sene, many wrestlers go by every court names, such as John Cena, after the American professional wrestler, or simply Building. Sunday's fight will take place in front of 10,000 spectators, the stadium at half its capacity to try to avert coronavirus infections.
The public will be there. We have reduced the number of seats because we have to respect the distancing measures. The arena holds 22,000 people, but we only have seats of 10,000 people. Respect the distancing measures.
Mystic plays an important role in traditional wrestling in Senegal. Fighters sport magical charms known as kris-kris, wrapped around their waist, wrist or biceps. They coat their bodies in a liquid deemed to imbued with magical properties and then face off in the arena, serenaded by crowd singers. Wrestler Ngarafen Ndiaye, a 22-year-old, said he started selling telephones during the pandemic. Nicknamed Sadio's son, Ndiaye added that he hopes to make a full-time living from wrestling one day.
At last Sunday's fight, the atmosphere in the arena was no different despite the pandemic. On the contrary, I was surprised by the crowd I saw at my fight. I expected Pono to come because of the coronavirus, but the arena was packed.
With the return of the season, many wrestlers in this poor nation of 16 million people are hoping for a boost to their incomes. Coronavirus restrictions put some 8,000 professional fighters out of a job, according to Senegal's National Wrestling Association. Reporting for Switch TV, my name is Harriet Chimea.
Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Our director has been Joy Maureen and producer Harriet Chimea. Until next time, do you have a safe, great weekend.